Welcome to the 8th and final part of the films of Paul W.S. Anderson. It's time to turn our attention back to the Resident Evil film franchise. After sitting out on the directorial duties of the second and third films, Anderson decided to come back for the fourth movie. I've explained before how I felt disappointed by the fact that Extinction was not the final movie in the series, though it was advertised as such. The movie was great, a step up from Apocalypse, and I felt the movie series could have gone out on a high. Naturally, when a movie series enters its fourth installment, there's always that feeling that it's not going to be as good as the previous three movies, certainly not if the sequels themselves were fairly strong on their own. When I heard Anderson was finally coming back to direct again, I did get a glimmer of hope that the movie might go back to the more grounded style of the first film, but when I found out that the movie was going to be in 3D, I was sorely disappointed. Before I even get to the review, I might as well say it out loud. Resident Evil Afterlife is Anderson's worst movie to date. The plot's not worth explaining if you haven't seen the third movie, but essentially it picks up from the end of Extinction, where Claire headed off to Alaska with the last survivors of her caravan. Alice defeated Dr. Isaacs, discovered a shitload of her own clones, and swore to come after Umbrella. And that's exactly what she does at the very beginning of the film. She and her clones assault the Umbrella headquarters in Tokyo and kick the asses of the Umbrella forces. However, her actual target, Umbrella chairman Albert Wesker, gets away. This opening scene is a good indicator of what's essentially wrong with the movie. It's over the top, action-packed, and even really funny in places. But at the end of the assault, Wesker blows up the base and all the Alice clones along with it. It seems to me Anderson was worried about the potential continuity problems with the film, and decided to deal with them by basically killing all the Alice clones at the start. But frankly, the clones were one of the few things I was really looking forward to in this movie. It could have opened up a whole new bunch of story ideas, but instead Anderson both figuratively and literally sweeps the whole idea under the carpet. He does the same with the real Alice, who gets all her telekinetic powers taken away by Wesker at the very beginning. So after all these crazy events, Alice tries to follow Claire and the survivors to Alaska, but only finds an airplane graveyard. However, she does find Claire with a device attached to her chest that makes her attack Alice. Once she removes it, Claire seems to suffer from amnesia, and the two head out looking for survivors of the zombie apocalypse. They wind up in Los Angeles, where a bunch of survivors are locked up in a prison, and they realize that Arcadia, the supposed infection-free town that the heroes were trying to reach in the last movie, is actually a ship that's now docked off the LA coast. There's a bit of a continuity error here, where Alice claims that she and the other characters learned of Arcadia through a radio message, but actually Alice read about it from a diary of someone who heard the broadcast message. I'd say Anderson is excused on the grounds that he didn't direct the last film, but they show the diary in this movie as well, so it just makes the error all the more noticeable. Well, as for the new supporting cast, I have to say they are probably the weakest from the entire Resident Evil film franchise. They're even less interesting than the cast from Alien vs. Predator. A big problem is that they're only introduced about 30 minutes in and killed off pretty much before the movie enters its final act. These are the most expendable zombie film characters I've ever seen. The only one who stands out is Bennett, a former movie producer who's a complete dick, and actually abandons the others in order to try to make his way to the ship with Alice's plane. However, amongst the prisoners, making his movie debut for the first time in the Anderson Resident Evil series is Chris Redfield, played by Wentworth Miller. What's even better is that Chris, Claire, and Wesker share a fight scene near the film's end. Now, Chris and Claire unfortunately don't get to shine that much. Chris mainly since he's introduced so late in the movie, and even Claire kind of loses her relevance because of her amnesia. Wesker, however, is one of the highlights of the film. He's almost exactly like his counterpart from the game, ruthless and practically unstoppable. He's played by Sean Roberts, I think a much more fitting choice than Jason O'Mara from the previous film, who I thought was just a little too nice. The film also features another big monster from the games, this time the X-Man from Resident Evil 5. As always, he looks great. Though his fight scene seems to suffer from a slight overusage of slow motion, it's probably there to enhance the 3D effect, and the fight itself is pretty damn awesome. It's just a shame it happens near the middle of the film, because I personally prefer to have the big monster bash at the end of a Resident Evil movie, like in the last three movies. Now, the movie isn't all bad. It's got some funny moments and excellent action scenes, but it's the plot and characters that are clearly its biggest weakness. The movie is all spectacle, and unless you're watching it in 3D, it's not going to be as impressive on regular old DVD. It has some brilliant visual parts, but the problem is that it follows the more action-oriented pace of the last two movies and doesn't manage to capture the feeling of the first film. Resident Evil Afterlife is an unnecessary sequel. The series should have ended with the third movie because you can see that the franchise is running out of juice. The film seems like such a ham-handed attempt at answering the questions left at the end of Extinction that it just fails to stand out as anything other than a 3D action movie. It's got a lot of entertainment value for sure, but it falls short in comparison to the prior films in every other way. And of course, there's a sequel coming. Anderson just couldn't let go of the cliffhanger ending, which seems to have become a tradition at this point. Don't get me wrong, I'd love for there to be Resident Evil films until the end of time, but Afterlife was a chance to do something new and different, which was completely squandered. If you watch it for the action zombies, and if you want to see Chris, Claire, and Wesker together in the same scene in a Resident Evil film, it might be worth watching. But otherwise, it's disappointing and not as good as the previous films. My grade for it is a 2.5 out of 5. Now to conclude this review series, I'd like to have a quick word about The Three Musketeers, Anderson's latest film. I already knew well in advance that this one was going to be in 3D, and therefore I had a slightly low expectations for it. However, to my surprise, the film was actually very good. It was action-packed for sure, but also very impressive visually, and best of all, had loads of comedy. The casting was solid and the characters were really likable, and in spite of its somewhat steampunkish additions, stayed fairly faithful to the original story. For my rating, I have to give it a 4 out of 5. It was all around a solid movie. As for Anderson's future projects, he's of course working on the 5th Resident Evil film. Even though I'm not really excited about it, at least Afterlife dropped the bar low enough that I think the 5th film can't be all that bad. Plus, I've heard Colin Salmon and Michelle Rodriguez are returning. I don't know how exactly, it smells like a bit of a plot device. Good or bad, I will be going to see the movie. Finally, although it was my goal to cover the entire filmography of Paul W. Anderson, I unfortunately had to leave out two movies, his TV films, The Sight and Drift, made in 2006, and starring Jason O'Mara, who played Wesker in Resident Evil Extinction. Unfortunately, neither of these movies are available on DVD, but I do hope to see both of them at some point. And of course, everyone wants to see my list of top 5 must-see films from Anderson. And here they are. Number 5, Shopping. As mentioned before, an underrated and forgotten classic with solid performances. Number 4, The Three Musketeers. Yes, this movie made an impression on me. Great action, great cast, great fun all around. Number 3, Resident Evil. Anderson's most atmospheric and stylized film. Good for creeps and zombies. Number 2, Event Horizon. Anderson's most effective horror film experience combines all the best things I love about horror and science fiction. And finally, number 1, Soldier. Just a genuinely heartwarming movie with great performances and a solid sci-fi feel. This has been Hannu the Honda Mäkinen. See you on the next one.